Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brendan. Together we make movies with DBS Films. Today's episode we're hopping into part 3 of a scene-by-scene breakdown of our newest horror feature, The Forest of Death. Forest of Death is now live on Amazon, Vudu, iTunes, and a lot of other platforms. Be sure to go ahead and show us the love by renting it, watching it. Also, these episodes might make a lot more sense afterwards. And also be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online. We make movies for our fans with our fans. If you ever wanted to be in the action on set, well, go ahead, take a look at our Discord channel because that's where we host all of our auditions. So we are picking up part 3. Again, scene by scene breakdown. We really just kind of highlight each scene, how the movie's going. And currently, right now, we just got done with what we considered kind of the lowest point in the scene, or at least my lowest point in like one of the scenes that we did, which was the Tinder photo picture. But what's really cool about this episode is we literally ended it by talking about what exactly we would do, how we would have Tom be the one making the Tinder joke, which is way funnier and way better, and it would give an opportunity for Dylan to then bond with Tracy. So this is why I really like these scene by scene breakdowns. Before we continue, do you want to just highlight how this practice really helps you as a filmmaker? And one of the reasons we think that like a lot of filmmakers don't actually get the level of reps that you need to progress is because by doing something like this, the only way we would know how to improve this scene is by us filming the scene and watching it now.
Yeah, the biggest improvement in a filmmaker's career comes from uploading the project on one of these platforms and then taking a hard look at it, from a top-down perspective. And I always, when I finish one of these projects and it's completely off and set up, have to do the QC run and make sure it passes QC. And then afterwards, I'll watch the movie almost as a fan and I'll try and figure out, all right, what did I do that I really liked? What did I do that, I want to improve on? And I'll kind of make those notes. And the second half is really getting feedback from reviewers. We're in the process of that right now. We have, I think, 100 reviews on IMDb. We have probably 15 to 20 critic reviews. And as you start to get a lot of these reviews from people you are not associated with or film critics, you kind of start to see the issues with the movie. And, lo and behold, some of my personal issues with the movie are ones that are being highlighted in the reviews. So, I'm seeing the mistakes that I made. I'm seeing the mistakes from other people's eyes, essentially saying, what I did wrong, what we need to improve on. So then if we do a 2.0 version of this, or if we decide to go in a different direction and make another movie that's maybe similar, or we pull scenes from this movie, I know how to do them properly. But it is almost impossible to give yourself feedback if you do not upload this thing, because you can always make it better in your head. You're always worried about trying to edit it differently. You really have to, say, look, this thing's done, put your hands up and just kind of send it off to distribution. And then the other thing is, like, you have to get reviews from other people. And I think a lot of filmmakers just struggle with getting visibility, getting reviews from other people. And I see a lot of Amazon movies from indie films that have 1 or 2 reviews on Amazon, and then that's it. And it's very hard to figure out what you did right and what you did wrong if you just don't have a lot of visibility. So that's just the process. But if you can get that visibility, if you can get those reviews, if you can have an honest sit down and an honest feedback session with yourself after you upload the movie, that's where the real growth happens. And I think that's what we did with the first 8 movies. That's the reason why the last 3 or 4 movies have done really, really well. And that's why that's why we're experiencing exponential growth with each movie, because we're really taking the time to learn what we did wrong, learn what we did right, and throw out the stuff that we did wrong and keep and try and build upon the stuff that we did right.
All right, so let's hop right back into what we did wrong. And, again, I would say it's always fun to be able to look back now. And I think one of the other benefits from making so many movies is, as you were mentioning, you get to kind of step away from it. We have 2 more movies that are finished. We have 1 movie that's basically ready to go. We're about to film a 3rd movie. So really, it's a lot easier to be subjective about these movies now too. You can kind of look at it and be like, oh man, we were so young a year ago. We didn't know all of this stuff. So it's nice to actually really dig into it. And we kind of pulled off from the Tinder photo one, as I was saying, is one of the lower ones, but those downbeats are tough. Still moves really good, but really the Tinder photo was just a setup for this beat right here. And this is our second lore dump. which is basically them taking a look at the photos. It's a little group one. We're getting some evidence and stuff going. I would say it gets the job done. It gets the job done. More importantly, it's really good in moving the plot and explaining there is someone out there that looks like other people. Everyone's kind of confused. It does a very good job of laying that first level of like concern of like, what's going on? This is kind of odd. But we do it in a fashion that's not, alarm bells they need to get out of there. So I think plot wise, it does a great job. As for the scene itself, I think it is kind of a little bit clunkier with Dylan and Tracy. Again, harder beats are kind of just coming up with stuff like that naturally. And then it's kind of, if you look at it, a lot of plot focus in the sense that there's not too much, jokes or anything in there to kind of break it up. I feel like almost like a Tom Winnebago line or something like that would have been like the nice little extra sauce it needed. But overall, gets the job done for the plot, which is the most important part, and it moves forward. It's not like it's really slowing down. So that's my opinion of the what's that in the background photo scene that we've done before for the second time for Force of Death. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this one's always hard with horror movies because you have to show that there is a presence or there is an evil or there is a threat out there in the woods, but you have to do it in a way that is not too alarming that makes them all want to leave. Because if they all left right now, then essentially you don't have a horror movie. So it's very tricky because we have to progress the plot more. We have to increase the stakes. We have to increase the threat, but we have to do it in a clever way to make sure that they don't leave. And I thought we did a good job in this. If you've watched Girl in Cabin 13, we've pulled this scene from Girl in Cabin 13. Unfortunately, I do think that the scene in Girl in Cabin 13 is better than this one. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's just much easier to shoot with two people. It's we had so many, there's like 4 people crowded over the computer, which made it difficult to shoot. I thought the dialogue was kind of long. It took a long time to really get to where it needed to go. And the real punch was just much more effective in Girl in Cabin 13. Obviously, Carl is spookier than Kellen and Roger in the woods, but it was just lacking the punch that I think it really needed. The scene kind of, it rose a little bit, it fell down, and then just kind of fell flat, where I think if you ended on a cliffhanger, if we were a little bit more clever in how we did it, I think you could have been a little bit more punchy. But that being said, it wasn't a bad scene. It's not detrimental to the movie. It got its job done, which was, hey, there's something weird here. There's a Roger threat in the woods. You can start to see the parallels of the shapeshifter lore coming out. And, now they're bringing the Roger character back to light, and they're like, this guy's odd, and you have Dylan say, I saw this guy in the woods earlier, so you're tying back the plot threads. So we had to do a lot of lore dumping in a very short time. I thought we did a really good job. It was engaging. I just wish that it's just missing something, and maybe it is the hook at the end, but it's just there's something that will take this scene from good to great. I just don't know exactly what it is right now, but I do think we did a better job in Girl in Cabin 13.
That's kind of where my mind was too. I think in Girl in Cabin 13, though, you had a different set of stakes in the sense that you had Brad straight up lying and gaslighting. So like he had seen Carl and he's like, oh, don't worry, it's nothing, just trying to make her feel good. So I feel like when people are watching that scene, they're almost kind of like, I hate you, Brad, which, great job, Stuart. You did a great job kind of being the magnet for that. But I think that element of it kind of added a lot more stakes to it, to where that wasn't really necessarily, there wasn't much going on here. There wasn't like oh, hey, prove you this or conflict level there. But I think the reason we did that is because exactly what you said, we wanted to serve the point where mainly the audience now knows they're seeing stuff. Everyone's kind of aware of it. And this plants the seeds for the later research scene in the third lore dump. So I think overall it does its job. But yeah, I think it just needs, and again, I was even saying like a joke or something, just a little bit of spice somewhere to kind of amp it up. But we go from that. Everyone says, oh, don't worry, it's not too crazy. And we have ourselves another montage. And it's the party montage for them. And then this is one where I was honestly really surprised with how well this turned out, which was the Roger Pop scare. And the reason for it is like, this is the movie magic type stuff where if you look on the actual set, you're kind of like, okay, this makes zero sense. Sometimes when you're filming a scene, it's like actually makes a lot of sense, like the way that they're moving and the way they interact is pretty straightforward. And oftentimes, you know, you cheat things and you're like, okay, I'm here, I'm there. And you basically put inserts from different locations. But this was one where, just because of how the location was, where basically the outside patio was like outside, completely above there, there's no real clear entrance to the top there. So like knowing how the set is actually set up, it's kind of conflicting to your brain when you're actually like filming it or seeing it there. But basically Roger is right in front of the door in a pop scare in the montage. And like I was saying, from the set design of it, it's kind of like, I'm not sure if this is actually going to work or make sense. What happens if he's like kind of floating upstairs or whatnot? Doesn't matter. Absolutely perfect. Great pop scare. I think it's a great way to pull them right out of that montage quickly. So I'm a big fan of the combo breaker by Roger in this one.
Yeah, I definitely think that doing a montage, which everyone is expecting to just be a happy, upbeat montage. I know he did like 13 of them already, but it's definitely interesting to see if you break that really quickly with a scare. And I've never really seen it done very much in different movies, but I thought it worked really well here. The downside with this scene is something that Kel mentioned, is we didn't have another place to do this scene. And the way we shot the scene, the way it was not ideal to get the most impactful pop scare. I thought we did really well for what we had. You know, you've heard us talk about it before, use what you got, and we had nothing, man. It was just like that middle area. The table had to be far away, so you really couldn't get a full frame pop of Roger. It was kind of messy. But I thought we did a good job with what we had. If I were to do it again, I think I could get a much better pop scare on there. I think you get something similar to Insidious, where he's like right up behind her, but you just need Chloe to be right behind that window. And we just didn't have that leverage, the open air to get that done. But, you know, once again, this is sort of like hitting gold that we kind of figured out with running a montage with upbeat, happy music and then hitting someone with a pop scare. Cause you're not expecting this right now. And I thought it was a really good way to kind of pivot this movie. Really, from this point on all the way through, it goes very quickly. And I think this is a great way to springboard this thing into the third act. I thought we did a really good job. It's an abrupt cut from the happy montage, campy kind of stuff into pretty much the movies that I like to direct, which are just a little bit more elevated horror. So I liked it. I think it's something we could utilize again. So that being said, I think that this scene was actually pretty good. You know, the only objective was to show Roger stalking them in the window, get a pop scare, remind the audience that this is a horror movie. And I think we accomplished all of that.
I definitely agree. And I do want to highlight what you just mentioned there, where you were saying it's kind of the kickoff point for the rest of the movie. So we are currently 38 minutes and 41 seconds in. And I kind of want to just take a little bit to highlight again why I think this is a huge step forward in our pacing, because right now, plot wise, I think we have it perfectly set up for a launch into the final rest of the movie. And again, you know, you'll see some indie movies where there's only 10-15 minutes. We're basically at the halfway point and we're about to, you know, hit the go as much as we can when it comes to getting these active scares. And in this time, if you think about it, we've had an intro that explains the lore of a shapeshifter. We've had the character development of, you know, these two relationships that were going on. You have one that's currently in a relationship, one that they're new, they're awkward. So you have the dynamics completely set up. You have Roger, who basically explains exactly what's going on with the lore and the shapeshifter. And you now have photos showing specifically, not only with the POV, but now with the photos, that they are being stalked. And now you pick up on Roger, who again is kind of that little red herring there. So do you want to just talk about how, you know, to me, it's such a nice package that we finally managed to create with the pacing to get to the 38-minute mark, when typically, if you look at our like last movies like The Hateful Eight or things like that, by the time we get this momentum going, you know, like Girl in Cabin 13, I would say maybe it's like the fire montage scene is kind of when it gets going, but then there's still like lulls. Really, we did such a good job setting this up so it can just be straight action moving forward, like pretty much coming up right after these next few scenes.
Yeah, the main takeaway that I take away with this movie is that the pacing is just really good. I think we definitely took a step up in pacing, and the next movie, Into the Forest, has very similar pacing. From what Kel's telling me, the Roger project has very similar pacing. So we definitely kind of leveled up and figured out how to really pace these movies properly. And I think pacing's twofold. Number one, you have to make sure you're hitting the proper beats, the structures in place, that the pacing of the script is proper. But the second thing is you just have to have experience. I have a good idea of how long these scenes are going to take and whether or not they're going to be boring, or how to kind of just manipulate them in editing to make it as seamless of a, as fast pacing as we possibly can. And whether that's with montages or just moving everything forward as quickly as possible and cutting out anything that's kind of fat or just kind of slows down the overall pacing. I was just really happy with what we did with this one. And I think that this one is going to actually do very well in AVOD platforms with ads, because I think once you click on it, whether or not you think it's good or bad, I think people are going to watch it all the way to the end. And that's really what you want to see. And I think a lot of indie filmmakers struggle with pacing, but I think that, it took us pretty much 10 movies to get to this point. And this one is the first one where I could confidently sit back and say, we really did nail the pacing. I think we did a really good job with this. I think it's an entertaining movie, hour, 15 minutes. It goes really quick. It's almost like a Black Mirror episode. It's just very quick, one-off, gets you from start to finish. But that's what you want as an indie filmmaker. You want to make movies that people watch all the way through. I think we leveled up on this one. I'm extremely, extremely happy with the pacing of this movie.
Exactly that. So we just saw Roger pop scare. Tom becomes brave man. Tom runs out there trying to fight Roger, and he brings Dylan along with him. This scene, I know it was one where it's a little bit harder because we filmed it at like the very end of the night at like 4 or 5 in the morning. So everyone was kind of tired. We're walking around at night. So that was kind of a little bit tricky, but I think this scene, at first we were kind of worried about this, at least in the writing phase. This is what you were worried about. Like, they're just going to keep going outside. I don't want them to. So this is the first time they go outside. And again, to me, I think it perfectly makes sense because that's where they're seeing Roger. But you basically have Tom go outside and they split up. They see nothing. They have a fun little line where like Tom's like, go ahead and say something. And I like that, like to impress the girls. That was actually a line that I liked a lot. And then we basically go ahead and we have an inserts of, seeing multiple Rogers, hearing multiple voices and things like that. So they see something scary that, in their opinions, multiple people out there, so they don't want to be outnumbered. That's kind of the gist of how the scene unfolds. I would say, overall, this is kind of a textbook scene of them putting themselves in danger. And it amplifies it with, seeing people out there. But I think one thing I take away from this one is having that first person POV of the forest gets a little bit, spookier. It's not really any big active scare. He just kind of pulls the flashlight on Dylan as like a fake pop scare. But I think it does a really good job of building the suspense. I think it's also highlights just how much, better a scene's going to be when you have a good lore developed of what the shapeshifter is. Because at this point in time, them going out there, basically the audience and everyone knows it's not a good look for them.
Yeah, I just think with this one, this was honestly editing this scene was very difficult. I was never really happy with it. But it just comes from like getting those voices that come from the woods was just very difficult. It's very difficult for us to make voices come like they sound like they're far away. And I don't know, it just might be a me thing where I'm just never really happy with it because no one ever really brought it up. I've showed it to many people and no one's been like, that sounds like you did it in post, which is what we did. But I don't know, man, when you're making audio scares, I think I might actually put this on the ban list because even in Into the Forest, one of the weaker scenes in this upcoming movie is the one where they're like hearing noises in the woods. It's just hard to do that. And I don't know what we would have done here because once again, it's like you can't really show too much and make them feel too threatened because they would leave. But I'm really not a fan of hearing voices and audio stuff in the woods. It just, to me, it never really works out too well. Film is a visual medium. I think you have to show something. What that would be, I don't know. Maybe if Roger was out there, maybe they saw other people. I don't know. But to me, if they saw multiple people out there instead of voices, they would just leave. So I think we have to kind of figure out what we want to do. once again, I think the noises and the voices are fine, but I do think if we put a little bit more brain power in there and really trying to figure out what we need to do, I think we could replace this with something else that's more visual and would act as a stronger beat as opposed to, what we do with the voices.
I could see that. I'm gonna jot this down as another one of those scenes where I just feel like we need to figure out how to do it and not just give up on it. I forget what there's another scene that you're like, it's on the ban list, and I'm like, you just don't know how to film it. Trying to remember. I think it might be like the Joe Pop scare or something like that, but we figured that one out by breaking glass. But yeah, it's one of those things where this is a very critical connector scene because it gets us to the Joe phone cars or phone call scene. I think overall for the voices, I mean, if you ask me, does it sound like it's coming from the woods? I'm immediately like, no. But then I'm also like, well, it's a shapeshifter. So like maybe I think that's going to happen with Into the Forest too, where I'm like, it's a witch. What does, a witch can make it sound like whatever. I do agree though, if we do figure out how to make it sound like it's coming from the woods, it would be spookier. But overall, I think it makes the connecting, or it makes the connection pretty easy to the next scene, where basically they come back in, they're startled. And this was one where I just remember early on in the script, like we knew we'd have a call like this with like Joe and Roger to like kind of reveal it. I would say again, it's a great plot scene and it needs to happen, but it's missing a little sauce in my opinion. And again, I think the saving grace is kind of Ben's line of, she wants to have a good time. No, she wants to talk to you. She doesn't have a good time. So there's a little comedy there. But I think when you look at it as a whole, the movie is really, really, like, we have a lot of really good scenes there. And this is another one that to me is kind of like another good scene in the sense of it gets the job done. You explain that Roger actually isn't there. It makes sense. And then I think the most critical thing with this scene is also the fact that they come to a conclusion to stay. And I think our biggest fear was after the feedback we got from Girl in Cabin 13 was like, we just want to make it so it makes sense. Murder House made sense because they can potentially get money. They're like motivated by that. And this one was the classic horror group going out there on vacation. And, more than anyone, that's someone who should be like, I'm getting out of here. So I think the phone call scene itself was good. It gets the plot going. It's quick. It explains what it needs to explain. And there is a little bit of that humor there, but I think it could have been improved maybe one way or another somehow. But that being said, it sets up exactly what it needs to set up, which is they understand that wasn't Roger, and then they come to a group decision that they need to stay.
Yeah, I don't know how to make the phone call scene any better because it really just is a plot device to be like, hey, the person you saw out there wasn't Roger because he's watching the ball game. And I don't like phone conversations. I don't think they work very well. Because even the Officer Hawk Dillon one, it's just not as spicy as like the other stuff. But your only other option would be for them to go to Joe's like cabin and then see Roger there. It doesn't really make any sense unless they call Roger and Joe over to take a look at the property, but then you kind of lose the whole Roger outside the window kind of thing. Like there either needs to be another character or we just have to scrap it and really do a rehaul of the script. I just don't know how to do it. I think like the phone call is the only way you can do it. And it, once again, like you also can't make it like too intense because they would leave. And I thought we did a good job, like you said, on the scene after this is a little downbeat, asking if they want to stay or whether they want to go. I do think that, the relationship with Dillon and the Tracy character wasn't really as clear as it could have been because the whole reason for them to want to stay would be because they wanted to hook up together. And we didn't really develop their relationship as strong as I really wanted to, as strong as I thought we did in the script. So I think that one's just a little bit of an issue as far as like, why would these two people want to stay when all this crazy stuff is happening? But no one said anything about it. And I think it serves its purpose. The whole phone conversation, the only objective of that scene is to show them that Roger is watching a ball game. And then the downbeat is just to kind of reiterate the plot where we are at in the movie, because now we're really going to start to go quick. Make sure everyone's on the same page. And then we just want to address the plot of why don't they leave? Well, they didn't leave because they all agreed to stay, because the stuff that they've been seeing is weird, but it's not weird enough for them to want to leave.
Yeah, and I think it really is the case, as we've mentioned now, with a few of the scenes that they're very plot device specific, but that's exactly what you need for pacing. I think where I want to go ahead and end this episode is just highlighting the difference that, coming from the Hateful Eight and the first few movies that we've made, we'd have scenes that not only were slow, but they also didn't even contribute to the plot. And I'm really kind of looking at a lot of like these early downbeats and scenes like that. And it wasn't really until The Haunting of the Morgan Estate and The Devil in the Room where I think we started to get a lot more of the devices down, in the sense of, this is the generic structure of what needs to happen, X, Y, and Z. And now, especially for the last three movies that we've made, it's something where I think it's refining the details of it. And I think Forest of Death really highlights it the most, in the sense that we now have these structures and these devices in place. And ideally, as filmmakers, as we're developing, it's only going to be improving these, making them better, making them make more sense, and just kind of really hitting home. And I think a clear example is like the character development improvement from like something like The Unseen or any of the first movies, and just movies like here. So what are kind of your thoughts as DBS on a whole, now that we're seeing these scenes, even if they're not, the most visually or like stunning, which again, you need to have scenes like this that are downbeats, they still are very effective. Like, I don't think there's a single scene here that does not serve a very specific purpose. And in a lot of indie films, that is unfortunately not the case by a mile.
Yeah, you really, every single piece of dialogue that you have, because you really only have an hour, 20 minutes to tell a movie. And that may seem like a lot of time, but it really isn't. To develop a whole plot, to, layer the story, to create an interesting, engaging story, an hour, 20 minutes is not a lot of time at all. So you really have to pick your downbeats. And I think a lot of indie filmmakers spend too much time on downbeats, or they have downbeats that just have nothing to do with the plot at all. And it's detrimental to the movie. It's detrimental to your pacing. So I think the first step of really starting to make good movies is to understand downbeats and making sure that you're layering them with either lore or character development, or you're progressing the plot forward with dialogue. I think that's the first step. I think that's where we are right now. I think how you make a great movie is just adding more spice to these downbeats to make them very interesting, to really develop the character, to really develop the plot, and just really solidify the story. So the dialogue that you're listening to is very engaging and just, builds upon that story. To do that, it's very difficult because number one, you have to write a really good scene. And number two, you have to direct the actors to act really good in the scene. And you've heard us talk about it before. Downbeats are extremely, extremely difficult to act. They're very, very hard to do. So it's almost like, if you get a really good downbeat, it's a combination of multiple factors. But I really spend a lot of time trying to analyze these downbeats and make them as good as possible, because I do understand the difference between a good and great movie is just really getting these downbeats to work, really being able to develop the characters, and really be able to like flesh out the plot. And a lot of the reviews for this movie, we get, I wish I knew more about the shapeshifter. I wish I knew more about the lore. And that's a great review. I love seeing that kind of stuff because we can develop that in the 2.0 version. But if this was a really great movie, if we did a really good job in downbeats, we would have figured out how to layer this stuff a little bit more, just to give the audience, that little bit more spice that they're looking for. And this movie was about 5 or 6 minutes short because we did cut out the intro scene. I do think you can put 5 or 6 minutes back somewhere, and I think that would give the audience the lore and the story that they're looking for.
Oh yeah, you can definitely add on to this. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Next episode, we are going to pick up where things get a little bit dicey for our gang. Be sure to take a look at The Forest of Death online on Amazon, Tubi, or not yet on Tubi, but Amazon, Vudu, iTunes. And be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online, because we make movies for our fans with our fans. So if you want to be part of the action, go ahead, take a look at us. But until then, have a good one.